Thank you, Crystal. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Taylor Carter. I am the Regional Architectural Manager with Marina Ware. Today, we're going to be talking about the head of wall fire joints and how you can protect them. So as Crystal said, this will be worth 1 CEU credit, HSW, so you will be getting your accreditation from this presentation. So we're going to go ahead and hop into it. So some of our course objectives today, we're going to identify a variety of joint types, including their UL assemblies and their ratings. We want to discuss the IBC or International Building Code that relates to the fire resistant joint systems and the fire stopping. We want to evaluate different types of joint products and systems. There are different types of advantages and the disadvantages in regards to their durability, cost, and safety. We also want to apply knowledge to specify fire resistance and acoustical joints. So let's go ahead and identify the wall joints. What exactly is a gap or a joint? The IBC definition of a joint is the opening into which in between adjacent assemblies that is created due to building tolerances or designed to allow independent movement of the building at any plane caused by thermal, seismic, wind, or any other loading. These commonly used materials that will provide fire and acoustic solutions include your preforms, your compressible intumescents, the fire-rated drywall accessories, drywall rip, and the sealant and spray applications. The common types of joints and gaps include the head of the wall, wall to column, floor to floor, bottom of wall, wall to wall, and floor to wall. So a head of wall joint is the gap distance between the wall or the wall sheathing and the overhead structure. The joint width is measured from the top of the gypsum board to the underside of the deck. At the metal deck and floor and ceiling assemblies, the width is measured to the bottom or the valley, and the area in the flute is not part of the gap and joint width. The joint is based on the amount of deflection required, and it's designed and constructed to allow the floor and ceiling assembly to move. So this will include your compression or your extension. Independent of the wall assembly, and the required movement is typically due to the forces such as the live and dead loading, thermal expansion and contraction, wind sway, or seismic movements. The head of the wall joint allows movement, preventing damage to the wall assembly, including the metal framing and the drywall. The drywall is an integral part of the rated assembly and is critical that it is not damaged or cracked. So when we're dealing with metal stud walls, you're typically going to see shapes like a C-channel stud design. This is going to be a non-load bearing, fire rated, and sound or STC rated. This will include your track, stud, as well as your gypsum board. These are going to give you your the number of layers is required to obtain the fire rating of 1 hour. So there's a multitude of UL assemblies that can be found in the UL fire resistance directory. The U400 series being the most common for the non-load bearing gypsum drywall assembly. Other designations for gypsum assemblies include the V and W, and the U411 and U419 are a couple of the more common specified gypsum wall assemblies. Penetrations and joints required to be protected with a fire stop system, and there's a multitude of manufacturers of framing and gypsum materials available. So some of your resources include the Underwriters Laboratory, as well as the Gypsum Association, which is a great resource to look into. So now we're going to get into shaft wall assemblies. So let's take a closer look at what that means. Why do we need to discuss them as a separate topic? Because all U400 series wall types are not created equally. Quite often, fire stop systems tested and listed for use in typical 3.5 stud width are incorrectly utilized in a 2.5 CH or CT shaft wall system. So we're going to discuss the differences between a typical U400 stud wall and a U400 shaft wall. Typically, a minimum of 3.5-inch C-channel stud profile versus the 2.5 CTI or CH stud profile. There's a type of number of layers of gypsum, a type of number of gypsum boards that are listed for different types of applications. And the construction method. Shaft walls are built from one side because they are often used around large floor openings, such as a stairwell or a mechanical shaft. So on the right side, we have a CTI or CH stud and shaft liner without a finished side gypsum installed. And then on the left image, this is a completed assembly with the finished side gypsum installed. So you guys can see the differences in those images. So when we're dealing with the sealant fire stop systems, you have a 3A minimum 1-inch depth of sealant. So sealant required above both the shaft liner and the outer layers on the finished side. The encumbered systems with limited movement capabilities, often 8 to 10% of installed joint width. There's more on movement and compression and extension that we will discuss later on in the presentation. So when you're looking at the different bullet points that you see underneath that detail, you can look at 1, which is being the floor assembly, 2A, which is the floor and ceiling runners, the J-shaped, 2B, which is the slotted ceiling track, 2C, steel studs, 2D, gypsum board with a 1-inch shaft liner, 2E, which is the gypsum board 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch type and layers as specified in the UL assembly. So here we're seeing the difference, you have the 3A and the C, which is the forming material with the mineral wool, with a 50% compression, 1-inch joint width, which requires 2-inch of mineral wool. And then you have your 3B and D, which is a minimum of 1/8 inch wet thickness of fire stop spray. It must maintain a minimum 1-inch overlap onto surrounding substrates. So when we're going through these again, it's basically the same thing. The 1A with the floor assembly, 1B roof assembly, 2A floor and ceiling runners, 2B steel studs, 2C gypsum board with a 1-inch shaft liner, 2D gypsum board with a 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch type gypsum, depending on what is specified. So you also want to look at the unique use of mineral wool filler inside the top track, which replaces the need for sealants or spray. The simple installation and wall inspection is simplified and code compliant. And then once the gypsum is installed on the finished side, there are various preformed products available for use in the exposed joint. It's a clean reveal and it's code compliant. So now let's get into the course focus of what we're actually talking about here. That was kind of just giving you a general overview. So typically your head of wall, bottom of wall, or wall-to-wall joints. These are designed to accommodate movement, allowing for the assemblies to move independent of each other. Due to the forces such as a live and dead load, thermal expansion and contraction, wind sway, or seismic movements. So for an example, if you have a head of wall joint that allows floor and ceiling assembly to move without damaging the wall assembly and more specifically the drywall. The drywall contributes to the fire resistant rating of the assembly, and therefore it is critical that the drywall is not damaged or cracked. So here we're discussing the IBC requirements for the fire resistive joints. The 2021 International Building Code will be the reference code in our presentation today. So basically here on section 715.3, fire resistive joint systems. Joint installed in or between fire resistant rated walls, floor to floor ceiling assemblies, and roofs or roof to ceiling assemblies shall be protected by an approved fire resistant joint system designed to resist the passage of fire for a time period not less than the required fire resistant rating of the wall, floor, or roof in between which the system is installed. So when you have a flat concrete, the floor and ceiling assembly consisting of a concrete surface having a flat or pan/waffle deck underside. You also have a composite concrete and metal deck. This is a floor and ceiling assembly consisting of a metal deck with concrete overlay. And the metal deck underside will vary in style and size of the flutes. Then you also have your roof, which is a common roof deck utilized today, includes a flat concrete or metal. However, they also include insulation, such as a foam, insulation boards, and etc. And various roofing materials, such as asphalt, rock, rubber membrane, etc., etc. So, question, what is all the fuss about with the fire resistant and fire stop? All recognized building codes require the use of a passive fire resistant construction to include fire stop systems for penetrations and joints. In addition, the leading cause of death in fire is actually inhaling the smoke and the toxic fumes. So it's actually not you getting burnt up by the fire. It's actually the gas and the smoke that's actually killing people. So that's why it's so important. So I know, I don't know, Crystal, if they're allowed to answer this. It's just a question I like to ask in my presentation. So just to kind of prove a point, if you have a room that's measuring 20 feet by 20 feet by 20 feet, and then with a pencil-sized hole in the wall between the room and the fire has started, how long do you think it's going to take for the smoke to fill the room to a level that you cannot see your hands just 18 inches in front of your face? You guys can actually put in the chat if you'd like to take a guess at the answer. How long do you think it would take? I'll give you guys a couple seconds if anybody would like to chime in. We got 15 minutes. Anybody else? 10 minutes? 2 minutes? Going once, going twice, 30 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. All right, I'll tell you guys the answer. Three minutes and 40 seconds. So we had some really good answers in the chat. 3 minutes and 40 seconds is how long it would take for that room to fill up where you cannot see your hands 18 inches in front of your face. So the smoke can fill the 8,000 cubic foot space in that time frame. So all the fuss and focus on fire resistance in construction with fire stop systems is about saving lives. The IBC covers fire resistance and fire stop systems in Chapter 7, if you guys ever want to do some research onto it. So in that Chapter 7, the fire test criteria, the fire resistant joist system shall be tested in accordance with the requirements of either ASTM E1966 or UL 2079. There's a pass and fail components on both standards, and basically what goes into that are 4 different types of testing. You're going to have your assembly rating, which includes the F rating and the thermal rating, your cycling or your movement. This is for your seismic. You also have your hose stream test where it is required. And then you also have your L rating or your air leakage, which is optional. You also have your special inspection of fire resistant penetration and joint systems. So we'll get into that a little later on into the presentation. So there's 3 different levels of cycles. This should be a video. Yeah, let me see. This is a video. So this is actually, let's just pause that. So this is actually just showing you how they do that testing with the seismic movings. With the level 1, you have 1 cycle a minute for 500 cycles. Level 2, 10 cycles a minute for 500 cycles. And then level 3, 30 cycles per minute for 500 cycles. The nominal or installed joint width, the joint width at the time of the fire stop product is installed, and you will reference each UL system for specifics. So they're basically to kind of sum up what that video is doing is they're just shaking it as if you were in like an earthquake situation, just kind of showing the different types of movements you're going to be getting within that joint. So here we're going to talk about the International Building Code. So this requires the assembly, the gypsum, CMU, concrete wall, pretty much the whole assembly, to be third-party tested and listed as an assembly. This needs to prevent the passage of the fire for described time, prevent the non-fire side of reaching 325 degrees above the ambient or 400 degrees with the baseline ambient temperature of 75, and prevent passage of the hose stream through the non-fire side of the assembly. So when you look at these pictures here, so the top image, they're actually doing that testing, but this is more for like a joist floor system. So they're putting it into a furnace where it's actually hitting that temperature and seeing if it burns on the other side. That bottom photo there is actually where they're doing a wall assembly. So that's just one of the ways that they actually test. They want to prevent it from burning on the other side. And that's kind of how they know if it's passed the test. They also do a hose test where they prevent the passage of the water. So they will take a hose, kind of like what we use in like our fire departments. They will blast it onto that wall once it's been burned. And as long as the water is not actually showing up on the other side, it is passing the test. I believe we show that deeper in the presentation, but we'll go ahead and keep going and see what pops up. So now we're going to talk about the International Building Code with your deflection and compression. So in this diagram, a joint with a nominal 1 inch joint width is shown. The Firestop products have been installed at this nominal joint width, and a 1-inch gap requires a 3-inch leg deflection track or slotted track with 3-inch slots. So assuming that the Firestop system will support 50% compression and extension, the image depicts the effect of the floor and ceiling assembly moving down to compress the joint to 1/2-inch width. And then that 1/2-inch gap, which is a 1/2 inch up and a 1/2 inch plus a down of 1 inch bearing, requires a 2-inch deep leg track. So that way you're able to have your movement going up as well as having your movement going down. So if you take a look at this chart here, so the movement in a Firestop system is described as a percentage of the nominal joint width. So for an example, this table shows a joint listed with 25% movement gets movement equal to 25% of the width of the nominal joint. So the system has a class 2 movement capability limited to 10 cycles a minute for wind sway and non-seismic. So a 1/2-inch wide joint provides a 1/8 inch compression and extension with a total of a 1/4 inch total travel. So 1-inch wide joint provides a 1/4 inch compression and extension with a total of a 1/2 inch travel. So once again, this is just showing the same thing, but with a larger nominal gap is what we're showing here. So let's go ahead and discuss it a little bit further. So typical construction installations today are joints with a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch nominal joint width. So what are your expectations for movement and head of wall joints? The chart here basically provides and depicts various joint widths with unencumbered Firestop systems providing 100% compression or extension. So if the 1 inch of total travel is required, the joint width can be at 1/2 inch side. If 1.5 inches is required, the joint width is 3/4 of an inch wide. So the leakage test or the L rating is optional. However, the IBC 715-6 requires Firestop systems installed in a fire barrier to have an L rating. So fire barriers are required to be in the life safety design for healthcare, correctional facilities as part of the defend in place strategy of these facilities. So in healthcare, occupants cannot get up and exit the building as a result to the medical conditions they may be being treated for. In a correctional facility, we do not want occupants to be able to exit the building. I don't know about you guys, I wouldn't want a bunch of prisoners just running around. So that's part of the reason that they have to do it with the correctional facilities. A defend in place strategy requires the building to be compartmentalized to provide safe haven to more occupants from immediate danger. So the L rating test determines the air leakage of the Firestop system. The test determines the amount of smoke that can pass through from the fire side to the non-fire side. And the result is reported in cubic feet per meter per linear foot at both ambient temperature and at 400 degrees. So in English terms, basically we are using a room. We have a hose that's hooked up to it, which you see on the right-hand side. They pump it in with a bunch of smoke, and we kind of just see how much it leaks and how much the smoke is coming out on the other side. And then they actually dictate whether that has passed the test or not. So here is I'll just let you guys watch this. So as you can see there, that was a wall being taken off of the furnace. That's where they've heated it. And then you can see on this slide where they are actually taking that hose and blasting that burnt wall, and they are not seeing water on the other side, which means it has passed the test. So once the assembly passes the fire test portion, some joints require a hose stream test, which is what we're showing. The upper picture depicts the 212 nozzle located 20 feet from the test sample. And the lower picture exemplifies the extreme impact of the hose stream to the assembly, in which the gypsum on the fire side is completely gone, and the test wall must stay dry on the opposite side to pass. So now we're going to get into the special inspections because we deal a lot of that in Florida specifically, especially with a lot of our high rises. An overview of the following to expand on special inspections. So with a high rise building, if the occupied floor is located more than 75 feet above the lowest level of the fire department vehicle access. So if we are 75 feet above where the firemen can reach, this is when you're going to dive into special inspections. Category 3, the public assembly. So if you have 300 occupants or more, if it's an elementary, secondary school, daycare, adult education, public utility structures, explosive contents, things at that level, that's when you're hit a category 3. Then you have a category 4, which is group 1 and 2, having surgery, ER treatment facilities, fire rescue, ambulance, police station, designated earthquake, hurricane, or emergency shelters. This is also going to include your water storage and pump. These are just all different types of places where you're going to deal with the type of special inspections. So to kind of review the IBC, so on-site during the installation and basically the way that they do the special inspections is on-site during the installation and randomly witness a minimum of 5% of the total linear foot of each type of joint installed. Or they can do a post-installation inspection using destructive verification consisting of 1 sampling per joint system per 500 linear feet. So essentially what they're doing is they're going into these projects when they're already done. They will pick a random spot. They will actually be destructive and actually take a piece of it off to double check and make sure that it's actually code compliant. So that's kind of what's consisting of the special inspections. You also want to ensure the installation in compliance with the UL system or engineering judgment. So components to be verified include the assembly installed joint width, the backing materials such as the mineral wool, compression, backer rod, the sealant depths, which are cured based on shrinkage rate. The fire stop systems describe the nominal depth of the wet or uncured sealant. Therefore, the inspector will require manufactured published shrinkage rates for each sealant and spray fire stop so that he can verify the depth of the cured material. There's also a pass and fail. So any type of fire stop that does not comply will require repair or replacement and re-inspection of that fire stop plus 1 full additional inspection. The repair of the fire stop's damage during the inspection shall be conducted according to the manufacturer's recommended procedures and methods. Each joint or system applies to every fire stop system or engineering judgment. For an example, if 10 different fire stop systems are utilized on a project, all 10 systems are required to have 1 sampling every 500 linear feet of the joint that needs to be inspected. So we're going to get into the Underwriters Laboratory UL listed fire stop systems and kind of compare and contrast them. Why do we need to discuss them as a separate topic? Because all U400 series wall assemblies are not created equally. So can anybody read this? I'm going to assume that you can't because I definitely cannot read any of that. But basically what we're saying here is having the project partition types included in the project documents is common. And the sheet shown is typical of most projects today. So basically, we're just saying that a ton of details need to be included because it is such an important aspect of your project. And this is just showing that not all are created equally. There might be multiple different details, multiple different specifications. So we want to include details for these joints that can help minimize the confusion or rework. The head of wall details can also define consistent joint widths across all types of different products and make sure that they're ensuring the movement required can be achieved. You want to keep in mind that the joint width of the non-fire rated wall will influence the movement of rated walls. And what do we mean by that? So non-rated walls intersect or tie into the rated walls, and this happens all the time. So if the joint width at the non-rated wall is shown at 1 inch and the rated walls is 1.5, the movement capabilities are completely different. So the narrower of the 1 inch joint intersecting with the wider 1.5 will limit the movement of the wider joint to the capabilities of the narrow joint. So you want to use of a well-defined and relatable joint widths across all partition types will aid in communicating the project requirements and should minimize the confusion and related change orders to ensure that all joints provide the movement required into the design. So again, in simpler terms, we are just making it easier for the contractors and we're trying to resist having to go back and fix something. So here we're just kind of showing what kind of goes into the UL nomenclature for the joints. So you're going to have like the type of the system, the movement capabilities, as well as the nominal installed joint width. So what exactly goes into that? That is this whole entire UL resistive joint system. They do have a specific number for it. So basically what we're going to have here is you have the system number. So this is actually showing, this is the actual number that they're using. And then they have the issue revision date. So that's going to be the date that it was conducted. You also have your test standard. This is going to be what they abided by in the IBC to do this test standard or the ASTM testing. You have your assembly rating. So this is going to be whether it was 1 to 2 hours. You also have your nominal joint width. So it's going to show obviously the size. Movement capabilities, depending on what class it was in, the different types of compression and extension. Then you have your L rating at an ambient temperature and your L rating at a 400 degrees Fahrenheit. So let's go over the different types of joint products and systems. We're going to these are just showing some of the different details of the ways that this can be installed, but we're going to actually hop into the different types of products now. So here we're going to evaluate the different types of joint products and systems, the sealant and spray product characteristics. So you have the elastomeric, acrylic, or silicone. These are applied wet and uncured, which also causes inspection delays because we do have to wait for it to dry and cure. There's limited compression and extension because it actually can fail. That's where you will actually see the liquid start pulling apart. And they may require backing materials such as a mineral wool, bond breaker tape, or a foam backer rod. So with the first generation products and solutions, the encumber systems rely on adhesive bonds. So it's a 1/2 inch to 5/8 inch depth of sealant. So you have to kind of depend on the contractor to make sure they're getting that millage correct. There's varying compression and extension. So typically acrylic sealant is more limited to a silicone sealant, 7% to 33% of installed joint width. The Firestop spray, the encumber systems rely on adhesive bonds. So basically we're saying that it has to have a clean substrate or you will start dealing with failures. There's a 1 to 2 inch overlap onto the surrounding substrate. Backing is always required and its specific compression rates and orientation, and varying compression or extension to 20% to 50% of the installed width. Once again, these are applied wet, so we have to wait for it to cure, which also kind of delays your whole schedule. So that's something to keep in mind too. And you're also kind of dealing with a lot of waste with these products because you do have to extend them, typically 1 inch overlap on the face of the wall, and a 2 inch overlap when you're when certain applications are present. So here we're actually showing some of the issues that you can have with a sprayer sealant. The finishes applied to uncured or cured sealant or spray often crack due to the adhesion or dissimilar elastomeric properties. And they're also just not aesthetically pleasing. So if you're ever dealing with an exposed ceiling or exposed wall or something like that, it's just not going to look good. So you might want to go with a different option if you're trying to make it aesthetically pleasing. So on that upper left photo, this shows the finished coating over the sealant that was uncured. The similar results occur when it's applied over a cured sealant, simply because the paints and the sealants have different movement capabilities. That lower left photo shows a Firestop sealant installed against an exposed concrete ceiling. So in hotels and condominiums, this application often requires moldings or other additional components to hide from view. The upper right photo shows Firestop sealant in the head of a CMU wall joint. And then the lower right photo actually shows a Firestop spray at the head of drywall joint. Typical overlap is required in 1 inch in this application. However, it is difficult for the installers to maintain that overspray. Therefore, they often err with more than's actually required. So overall, this appears to be a good quality installation with the mineral flute fillers and joint backing materials installed with proper compression. So there's obviously no visible gaps, and the proper mill thickness of 1/8 inch wet or 1 16 inch cured. First generation products and solutions. The Firestop sealants also have bonding challenges, the raw edge of the drywall, material shrinkage. You also have construction debris as well as substrate preparation. So we're kind of just reviewing everything that we just went over with that. The sealant manufacturers typically describe a surface free of water, dirt, oil, frost, etc. in their installation instruction. It's almost impossible to achieve that when applying sealants to the roll cut edge of a drywall. So the inherent challenge with a fire stop and acoustical sealant is the adhesion bond, especially when the raw edge of the drywall, which is actually up in the upper photo, shows that there's a bond failure. Many professional installers overlap the sealant. Again, in the lower photo of acoustical sealant, this is applied at the bottom of the wall. The cleaning of construction debris, basically that's what happened here. It's kind of like if you're going to be laying down tile or something of that sort, you're going to have a failure if you don't clean your substrate. So that's just something that we have to deal with when we're dealing with these types of applications. So here we're seeing the difference. What's real, what's not. We would love if it looked like those left pictures, but that's just not realistic. Typically on the right-hand side, that's what we're actually going to be looking at. So you're not going to get your perfect clean lines with an application like that unless you have a very, very OCD installer with a owner that's willing to spend the money for him to take his time, and that's just not realistic. Now, when we're talking about the sealants and sprays, the coordination of trades required to ensure access to the joints for installation. So that's another issue, is having to try to navigate through these types of things. In the field, getting around the MEPs make it extremely difficult to install, inspect, and spray clean straight lines. So the photo on the left is a true environment found on most construction projects today. This is one of the more challenging sites, with it being from a hospital under construction. As shown in other photos, it remains a challenge to gain access and maintain a clean and crisp line with the acoustic or fire stop spray products. The T-shaped tracks with an additional layer of drywall have been a proven option to provide a code-compliant solution with higher rates of movement. So the T-track creates a shoulder which allows attachment of drywall below the track shoulder, with rips installed on the upper leg, allowing them to overlap the exterior surface of the wall, which is also protecting the head of wall gap in joint. So the use of additional acoustic or fire stop sealants may be required, and you need to consult the desired system for details. So we're basically showing a fire rip situation here in the right-hand side of the image. So if you are not understanding that, essentially you have a double drywall. One is connected to the track, the other one is connected to the stud, but they are actually not connected together, and that allows for them to move while also fire protecting the application. So let's review again. The drywall materials are readily available and can be cut down and used for rips in the front of the head of the wall gap. The head of wall gap doesn't require any fill materials, allowing for encumbered movement. This allows for large amounts of uncompromised deflection. It reduces the sound transmission through the head of the wall joint. The disadvantages of the shoulder drywall rip include the shoulder tracks need to be formed to accommodate the wall size, the fire rating, and the deflection movement. The installation of differing wall widths, the fire ratings, and deflection requirements require multiple track or material profiles. Labor to install drywall rips with a screw attachment every 3 inches on center on both sides. Multiple layers and a buildup, and it requires additional fasteners and labor to install 2 drywall rips per side. There is no expansion of materials to seal gaps or cracks when it is exposed to fire. The labor to install the caulks, which are actually required between the drywall rips and contour of overhead structure. The drywall rips need to be additionally contoured, the drywall rips need to be additionally contoured to cut to provide flute fill retention. And the possible construction joints at the intersection of the drywall rips require additional materials for sealing against air leakage, flame, and thermal passage. So let's get into next generation, kind of how we have upgraded the scene. So the next generation systems, these are going to be your preforms. I get excited about these because I think that they're really awesome. So the preformed joint products can be foam encased with foil housings, comprehensible gaskets, vinyl or intimate strips, and a metal or intimate strip product. So let's take a closer look at this. If you guys are familiar with the intimate strip, essentially this is it's kind of a peel and stick strip that goes into these preforms. And then once you hit that ambient temperature of 345 to 400 degrees, it will actually expand about 40 times its size. So we will talk more about that into the presentation. The color does not make it a fire stop. So just because you see something red, that does not make it right. The sealants and sprays come in a variety of colors to include red or some variation of white, blue, and gray if you're dealing with a reveal system or you want it to be aesthetically pleasing. The preformed fire stop comes in red of some variation, black, and white. The black and white color options provide aesthetically attractive options, allowing them to be exposed to the final design for the occupants. These are also going to be code compliant systems. Some preformed fire stops are tested and listed for use in the bottom of the wall joint as well. This allows for the same product to be used on all joints, which makes the inspection process a lot faster. So the preformed fire, air, and sound products provide aesthetically pleasing. The preformed gaskets will also support rubber baseboards and preventing roll under of the product themselves. So as shown in the lower left picture, the lack of a sealant or recessed cured sealant can allow rubber baseboards to roll under. You don't really have to deal with that if you're using a preformed system. So again, with their product design, the sealants and sprays install framing, top out, tape and bed, install fire stop or acoustical product, cure and inspect in 3 to 4 weeks. So that's kind of the whole process of using a sealant or spray. When you're doing a preformed, you install the framing, install the preformed fire stop or acoustical product, top out, tape and bed, inspect the same day. So we're not having to deal with or waiting on it to cure. So we're already fast forwarding in your schedule. It actually requires less labor because you don't have to incorporate multiple people having to install this. It's more of a click and place system. A lot of them will contribute to your STC as well as your UL. You can get these in a more aesthetically pleasing situation so that if you do have an exposed ceiling or something, you're able to leave it exposed. It's also very great for your special inspections because when you have a preformed system, you're not having to rely on the contractor to hit your millage. This already comes from the factory, the millage it needs to be. Typically, an inspector will go on these projects. They will see that it's a preformed. There's usually a tear away strip on these products where they're just able to say, okay, this is a preformed, tear it away and move on with their lives. So overall, there's a lot of advantages over using the traditional spray or caulking situation. So some of these products are available in these colors. I know we kind of went over the colors, but we're going to dig a little deeper into that. Pink, which is fire and sound rated. Black, which is fire and sound, also provides a shadow reveal when it is incorporated in being exposed. Then you have blue, which is sound rated for a quick visual differentiation from the fire stop products. So basically when you're dealing with an acoustical ceiling, that's when you're going to use just the sound, but you are able to get your sound and fire in one product. Most preformed fire and acoustical products shelf life is not impacted by the environmental temperatures. So that's something else to consider too, is that you're not going to have a failure with these type of systems. They are good for the life of the building. So until that building legitimately burns down, I mean, let's just be real here. How many times do we see contractors, I know they're supposed to go back and inspect it again and check up on that project, but how often do we actually see that happen? You don't have to worry about that with a preformed system. It is good for the life of the building. So here we're actually just showing a little video that kind of shows you some of the ways that these are installed and how easy it actually is. It's pretty neat. So this is a compressible fire stopping. This is tested and certified. So you will be getting your 2-hour with this. So basically it's giving you that cushion so that you can have your compression and contraction. And then you're also just gonna mud right over the top of it. So it's extremely easy, also very well hidden. So the preformed fire stop products, some surface mount to face of the wall. This includes the perforated attachment flange with the mud leg. You apply joint compound, remove the zip strip or the tearaway strip, sand and paint the wall. It's code compliant for performance. So very, very easy. You also have your compressible fire stopping. So these are factory assembled preformed products that promotes proper dosage when it is installed. It maintains flexibility over the life cycle of the structure, preventing cracking, hardening, or shrinking away from the drywall. Provides STC rated assemblies. With available accessories, it can be hidden from view. The red color is easily identifiable during your inspections, and the UL systems for the head of wall, wall to wall, and bottom of wall joints. You can also get these in your control joints. So that's something really neat too, is you can get your preform for your control joints in your walls. So we're kind of going to just review real quick to make sure everybody understands this. So the sealants, the challenge to obtain a finished appearance against a concrete, CMU surface, and etc. It provides short-term performance warranty, provides limited encumbered movement, and its limited shelf life and temperature restrictions. Where preformed, sharp, clean edges can be incorporated into the design, code compliant, providing fire, smoke, and acoustic abatement, provides high movement for unencumbered, unlimited shelf life and no temperature restrictions, and it provides long-term performance warranties. So the building code continues to evolve. So the 2021 IBC in section 715.6 now requires the vertical joint between an interior fire barrier intersecting non-fire resistant rated exterior curtain wall. That is a tongue twister. Consider using flexible preform fire stop drywall accessories against windows instead of the fire sealant for longer lasting joint protection from smoke, sound, and fire. So the right image is actually in Dallas, Texas. It's a project at the hotel room demissing wall that is terminating to the gypsum infill panel in the glass curtain wall frame. The solution used allowed for the designer to incorporate a code compliant product in which the joint width will be exposed to the view at the hotel. So in the 715.6 exterior curtain wall / vertical fire barrier intersections, the voids created at the intersection of the non-fire resistant rated exterior curtain wall assembly and the vertical fire barrier shall be filled with an approved material or system to retard the interior spread of the fire and hot gases. So currently there is no test standard available for the ASTM work committees that was established to study the application and to write a standard for adoption. So some solutions exist today and are based on a variation of the fire resistant joint test standards, which is going to be your ASTM E 1966 and UL 2079. Sound or STC issues are also a current challenge. Healthcare, hotels, apartments, etc. are often designed with higher sound rated partitions between the rooms and units to create privacy. So here we're just kind of going over the drywall rib. So these are reviews. I'm actually going to skip over this, so I'm not taking up too much of our time here. The sealant and spray systems versus preformed. This is just, once again, a review of that. Here we're showing the reveal system. So basically in this system, like I said, you're able to do a bottom of the wall reveal where it's fire stopped and rated. You can also add your sounds, but it's completely hidden. So that's something really neat about the preformed as well. Now, when we're looking at this, so we're actually discussing how you can skip steps in this product. When a shaft wall ties to the bottom of the fireproof's I-beam, utilizing the stuff and spray method, 2 mobilizations at a minimum. So 4 mobilizations, constructive inspection is utilized. So the first mobilization to install first half of the system in the gap and joint above the shaft liner. And then the second trip is to install the second half of the system in the gap and joint above the finished side of the assembly. So there's up to an additional 2 more mobilizations for inspection. So the complete wall assembly, including the preform system, are installed in the mobilization while the wall is constructed. The entire assembly and fire stop solution inspection completed during a wall inspection. So in fairness, with the comparison, when a preform fire stop product that installs on the face of the finished gypsum, 2 trips are also required. So the significant difference with this option is that the aesthetically pleasing reveal is provided as a part of the interior design of the building. So how do we specify these products? Basically with the Construction Specifiers Institute CSI Master Spec, you have your 078443 and 078446. These remain the most common CSI sections for the fire resistant rated joints today. Acoustic or STC rated products have historically been included in the joint sealants or gypsum board sections, but today we are finding specific sections for acoustical applications appearing in the 079219. This section is allowing for designers to break out the acoustic products to cover a larger, more demanding performance of material, supporting the acoustic design, and the requirements found in the buildings today. The joints certainly are one aspect of the requirements. Historical sections such as the gypsum board or shaft wall, often found on 0929, are being updated to direct contractor to the true section of the product specified, and they're required are being and the ones that are required are being defined. So for an example, in the related requirements paragraph, 078443, 078846, and 079216 are listed. Sustainability. So this is also really important. We want to make sure that we're getting our LEED with these products. The new LEED V4 standard emphasizes that building product transparency through its building product disclosure and optimization environmental product declarations, or EPD, and its material ingredient credits. So both of these credits encourage the use of building products and materials for which the life cycle information is available for reduced impacts to the environment. And the material ingredient credit encourages that the use of the building products and materials composed of less harmful chemicals and substances. So specifying a product that provides an EPD is the only way to meet the first credit. And EPD is a standardized way of quantifying the environmental impacts, such as acidification, oh my goodness, these words, eutrophication, as well as global warming potential of the product or system. So the EPDs help inform specifiers about a product or material, raw material extraction, and energy use, the chemical makeup, waste generation, emissions to air, water, and soil. So building products that provide a HPD can contribute to the material ingredient credit. So an open standard format for reporting product content and health information for building products and materials. The HPDs inform builders about health hazards associated with the product or material contents. So summary and conclusion. I'll just go over this one last time to kind of end us off. The benefits include the code compliant solutions, the pre-measured dosage to promote proper installation, innovative design solutions, including wall assembly and fire stop solutions, cost savings through schedule management, efficient inspections, process, and labor. And these are aesthetically pleasing solutions acceptable to the exposed to the view of the building design. This provides long-term performance warranties as well. So that is the end of our presentation. That was a ton of information, but fire stopping is extremely important, and this happens to be one of my favorite things to talk about. So essentially, these are the different benefits of the liquids versus the preforms. And now I'm going to open up for questions. So we're going to actually open up the chat, and if you guys had any questions that you'd like to ask me about the presentation or anything about fire stopping, by all means, go ahead and chime in now.
It looks like there was one question. What is meant by tearaway for preformed inspections?
That's a great question. So basically, whenever you're installing a preformed situation, there is a tearaway strip. So once these are actually put up into your wall joint, this tearaway strip, you're able to go ahead and install everything, and then that tearaway strip is left. So it's really good for inspections. If an inspector goes in and they want to know if what type of fire stopping was used, they see that and immediately know what it is. They know it's a preformed, and they're like, I don't have to ask any questions. This is 100% approved because it's factory. It's already comes from the factory that way. They just tear away that strip and they move on. So it's just a really good way to kind of fast forward with your inspections and make your schedule, minimized. How many companies have the preform product available? So there are multiple. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but there are a handful that do offer these preforms that are out there. So there's multiple. So whenever you're doing a preform, if you have a spec, for instance, where it needs to be an open spec, you can put multiple manufacturers. Anybody else? That was a lot of really good info, really fast. Good job. I had to try to fit in an hour. It usually goes over an hour, but I appreciate it. Let's see, how many companies, and then has Factory Mutual accepted these products? Factory Mutual, I am not exactly sure. I can find out for you though. My email information, I believe Crystal, I'm not sure, Crystal, did they have my email information? Because I'm not sure I actually gave it to them on the
I'll put it in the chat for everyone.
Yeah, that'd be great. If she's going to put my email, if you wanted to send me an email about that, I can definitely double check on that. I'm not exactly sure if they have accepted that or not. Is there a summary or a PDF of the presentation available? Yes. So this will be available on AIA's website. I believe Crystal will give you guys access to that.
Yes, and it's also under your Zoom toolbar, it's under resources, and you should be able to download it.
Amazing. Any other questions? Yep, there's my email, guys. If you have any questions about the preformed or anything that we discussed today, by all means, send me an email and I'm more than happy to follow up with whatever you need, whether it be literature details, just answering questions.